Good evening. I'm your host, Tamara, and welcome to another installation from Just Another Messenger, where we raise the situational urgency and consciousness towards today's current events. Now, we are at the greatest awakening in society where we can no longer hide, ignore, or escape the past that tells our present circumstances and the greatest prediction of our future. Now, therefore, on each episode of Just Another Messenger, we're going to dive deep into the historical past by examining the philosophies, legal system, and the political decisions that continues to influence our daily lives. Now, before the gavel, before the gun, before the ink was dried on the stolen scrolls, there was the land, there was the people, and there was law. Not on paper, not written on any type of paper, but this law was in stone, in the stars, and in the blood of the earth-born nations. This is what you call the First Nations. And in this episode titled Void Ab Initio, we're going to pull back the veil of the great legal illusion, the latter's patent, the Doctrine of Discovery, and every imperial act that claimed ownership over the lands now called Americas. We're going to reveal what truly were fraudulent from the beginning. That's what void ab initio means. Void from the beginning of inception. And what we're going to do, we're going to explore the divine and natural laws that was broken by the colonial conquest, the legal fictions that was upheld by force and silence, even silence to this day. Because what silence means in law, it means I agree. So, and we also going to explore the rising call of the Black, indigenous, American. Now, those are political names that was given to indigenous people, First Nations of this land. Different names that alluded to that. This is called the Earthborn, who now demand repudiation, restoration, and return of what was stolen. Now, if you've ever asked who gave them the right, that's to be a great question. Also, you may ask the question, by what authority? That's a great question as well. This is the episode that's going to answer that. So no one did. That's the answer. We're going to, this as simple as form, in 1 minute, we can close it out. No one gave the authority. No one did. And that's why it is void ab initio. So stay with us, because right now, like I said, we're at the greatest awakening because the earth remembers, and so do we. But this isn't just another message. This is a declaration. So please join the conversation during the episode. Your comment truly matters. And hit the subscribe, share, and like button to be a part of more thought-provoking conversations in the future, because you wouldn't want to miss it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the information on how you can continue to reach us and contact us along the way. As you can see here, you can reach us through our YouTube page at Just Another Messenger. I'm on YouTube. Now, if you are on my personal Facebook page, which is Tamara L., please go over to the YouTube page. And it's just for the algorithms and for the information to continue to feed through their matrix system, not for the monetization process. We're also on X. We share our information on X. If you're on X at JAM _404 podcast. And if you or someone you know would like to be a part of the show, please send a warm, friendly email to justanothermessengerpodcast@gmail.com. As I stated, we're not monetized over on YouTube. Please support the channel via our Cash App at $just another messenger. So that's the information we have that you can reach us on there. And also, if you forget about all that information, guess what? And you can only remember Just Another Messenger. We have our new website at www.justanothermessenger.com. So we're going to cut in and out before we get started here. right, all right. We have a lot to discuss this today before we get started. We're going to remove that. And you say, okay, Tamara, what is this about void ab initio, invalid from the beginning? You know, in this segment, we're going to tie this segment because we always like to look at the historical past and look at today's present circumstances. Okay, so let's begin with the end in mind. Let's begin with our present current circumstances, what the society and the people within the society is up against at this point. We're up against colonial system that is putting things in a particular order, and that order will still be in an imperial fashion. So, which means that things are being challenged, such as birthright citizenship, true nationality. And I say that because we're going to break that information down. Nationality is also being challenged. Birthright citizenship, immigration is being challenged. And there's also challenges that are going on with the rising nations between native and indigenous nations, which are the people that has been classified as Black, Negro, colored, African American, are rising up and retaking their rightful position back amongst being the first nation of this landmass. So those are some things that's going on current. Okay, Tamara, what does that have to do with historical past? I'm glad you asked that question. We're going to get into that because we're going to look at this beautiful island right here. We're going to look at this beautiful island. It's known as Turtle Island. But before we do that, let's not get in trouble first. Let's do this before we get in trouble. Let's go ahead with our disclaimer. Just Another Messenger is a platform dedicated to the public education, historical awareness, cultural critique, and transformative decisions under the protection of Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, commonly referred to as fair use. Just Another Messenger does not provide statutory counseling for any United States color of law jurisdictional proceedings, and I'm going to show you why. The content presented by Just Another Messenger may include excerpts of copyrighted material such as images, audio, video, and written works for the purpose of criticism, commentary, news reporting, education, scholarship, and research. All such usage is non-commercial in nature and intended to stimulate public discourse, raise consciousness, and support transformative learning. We do not claim ownership over any third-party copyrighted material used. All copyrights and credit belong to the original creators. If you are the copyright holder of any material featured and have concerns regarding its use, please contact us directly via email for prompt resolution. And as we say, you can reach us via email at justanothermessengerpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Now that we have our disclaimer out of the way, let's bring this beautiful picture out. Let's see who we have in the house today. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Dexter, we have Dexter over here live. We have our first responders. Dexter, thank you for tuning in. I know we have people. I cannot, for the life of me, get this Facebook messages to come in. I see Dexter's coming in on Facebook, so that's good to see. It may be working. It may be working now. So thank you. Thank you for tuning in. So if you're over on my personal page on Facebook, put a message in there so I can see that it's working. I see what Dexter think is working. And if you're on YouTube, if you're tuned in, please put a comment in there so we can go ahead and get the information out into the matrix world of YouTube land. All right. So let's go ahead and look at this. Let's look at this image right here. This is a picture of the land, the original name of the land that is known today as Americas, North, South, Central America, the Americas and the adjoining islands. Okay, the original name, as you can see, is shaped like a turtle. It was called Turtle Island, the original name of the land. Now, let's give you like a mythical story regarding the origin of the creation of the story. Now, we're doing this for context and for understanding, because this is the war that's being waged on the nations and the restoration of the First Nations being restored back to their resources. And then we're talking about all resources. So you have to understand the foundation of the story in order to know what battle and what you're fighting for, and to understand what you've been removed from, and to understand who's who and what's what. So this is the body of land that is up in international upheaval as of today. Now, according to the Anishinaabe nation, which is, if you look up Anishinaabe, the current European name you're going to see is Iroquois, which is Iroquois. All right. Then you have the Lenape. All right. Then you have the Anishinaabe. And you have many Algonquin speaking people of the earth was formed. They said the earth was formed on the back of a great turtle. After a sky woman fell from the sky world, they said the animals from the sea dove beneath the waters to bring up soil for her to stand upon. And the turtle offered his back, and from there the land expanded, and that's how it received its name, the Turtle Island, which means the land is living. Say, this is not just a myth, it is a memory of the land. Now, the turtle is the foundation that represents patience, time, peace, and the rhythm of the earth. Island is the unity of the diverse, the bioregions that are held together in a sacred ecology. Now, from an astrological perspective and an astronomical perspective, the turtle shell, it has 13 inner plates, which represents 13 moon cycles, and it has 28 outer plates, which represents 28 day cycles. That is very important to know that. Now, Turtle Island, because we're gonna be talking about the difference between earth law violation versus natural law violation. So keep all this in context. Now, Turtle Island is therefore not merely a geographic name, but it's a spiritual cosmogram, a living map of time, law, and relation between humans, earth, and the stars. Now, this is what Turtle Island and the First Nations were like before the 1500s, before the invasions of most colonizers such as the French, Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, English, Sardinia. There's many of nations that came and colonized the land known as Americas. All right. So these are the First Nations. As you can see in the news, you have the Muskogee Creek Nations that is currently challenging the blood quantum of the treaty. So they're challenging that information with the Creek Nations. And then you also have the challenges with the Constitution regarding birthright citizenship. We're gonna bring all this together. Now, as you can see, if you look at this map right here, all right, like I said, these are all the different nations that came and colonized the Americas. You had the Spanish, you had the French, you had the Dutch, you had Sardinia, then you had the British along the eastern coastline. The British were the last colonizers that ended up throwing wars of secessions, being all the other nations ceded their territorial jurisdictional rights over to them. Now, if you go back into episode 1 and 2 on Just Another Message, that information is thoroughly explained in detail. We're not going to do that here. So we're going to get into it, right? All right, so let's look at this. The basic tool for the manipulation of the reality is manipulation of words. Now, if you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words. Now, that is a quote from Philip K. Dick. He was an artist, propagandist, a Hollywood filmmaker, and things of that nature. Go and look at the work, and you'll understand propaganda that deals with words and manipulation. And also it ties into Netflix and chill, Amazon, and all the things you see today, Tubi, Amazon Prime movies, all of it is tied into manipulation of words. Language is connected to the nations. We're at a point, like I said, we're at the most greatest awakening now. We have to start looking at these things as a connectivity and not separate. All right. Now let's look at some legal maxims. We have to get the understanding of these legal maxims to understand the arguments that you're seeing on your CNN, all the main street media news. You have to understand the legal maxims that's being talked about, because they're speaking in Latin. They're speaking in these legal maxims term. Let's get into it. All right. What is the lawful maxims for legal proceedings? It's called legal maxims. Are short, authoritative expressions or aphorisms, which means general truths or principles of general legal principles, often rooted in Roman Canaan law. We highlighted law. You're gonna highlight law. Latin, highlight Latin, underline Latin, or customary jurisprudence. Jurisprudence, in other words, you need to know about positive law. Well, Tamara, if jurisprudence is positive law, what is negative law? Negative law is statute, codes, and ordinance. We're going to get into that. And they distill complex legal doctrines into concise, memorable phrases and are used to guide judicial reasoning, interpret statutes, and support arguments in legal decisions. I'm being very direct and matter of fact about this because I need you to grab this and get it. All right, let's look at this. This is a comparison between law versus legal, the understanding of law versus legal. The first column is law, and it is divine and cultural universal order. Legal is man-made, government, legislator, courts. The definition for law is a set of foundational principles that govern existence, morality, and justice. Legal rules imposed by a political authority to regulate conduct. Law by nature is inherited, discovered, and is unchangeable, which means it can't be leaned upon. The nature of legal is constructed, adaptable, and is often political. The source of authority for law is by nature, reason, divine will, a higher moral authority, which means it comes from your God. That's why I say you must worship under your own vine and fig tree. The source of authority of your law comes from your God. The source of authority for legal comes from statutes, constitution, executive orders, and court rulings. The relationship to morality for law is strongly rooted in moral truth and justice. The relationship to morality for legal may or may not align with morality or justice. The application for law applies universally, independent of man-made systems, unalienable. The application for legal applies within jurisdiction. We talked about jurisdiction. Go back to previous recordings. You'll see jurisdiction in there, or legal system. The binding power of law is self-evident. I hold these truths to be self-evident, but then you put a legalese in there. You see, that's how the twisting goes in. Requiring recognition, not enforcement. The binding power of legal is enforced by threat of penalty or coercion, and it could be threat, duress, or coercion. The interpretation of law is understood through conscience, and the more modern word for the word conscience. This conscience is the same word when you see conscience. All right, reason and revelation. The interpretation for legal is interpreted by judges, lawyers, esquires, that has the membership with the bar, B period, A period, R period. British accredited registry that's out of England. And legal codes, legislated statute codes and ordinance, and executive orders. The example of law is do not kill. That's a natural law. Right to self-preservation. Law of cause and effect. An example of legal is tax code, speed limits, contract enforcement. The common usage context for law is philosophy, theology, natural rights, indigenous knowledge, innate from the breath of your ancestors. The common usage context for legal is court systems, government, statutory law, law enforcement. I hope I'm trying to make this as clear as possible. Now, let's look at why is Latin in English judicial proceedings. Let's look at that. Now, in common law, in English, common law is not purely English, it's a hybrid. The English legal system, which the U.S. inherited, especially after the American Revolution, was already infused with Roman and canon church law. Roman law contributed principles of contract, property, equity, and legal maximums. Canon law, which is church law, influenced courts of equity, marriage law, trusts, and more reasoning within the law. That's why they say, do not throw out your Bibles, do not throw out your Qurans, because the foundational element is on canon law. All those legal binding mandates, moral mandates are in your Bible and they're in your Quran, and you can use those as your cultural guide in any judicial proceedings. So do not throw those out. Do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. They can all be used. All right. Let's look at that. So these systems were adopted and infused into England's legal tradition, especially during the medieval period from 1066 to 1500, when the church and the crown were deeply intertwined. So when the U.S. inherited English law, we're talking about after 1783, at the Treaty of Paris, it also inherited centuries of Roman and canon law embedded within this. So when you go into, so what happens, a lot of times I've encountered people that has went into what they called a courthouse, which is an amity court, a court of amity, which is on land. A court they're using sea laws on the land, court of amity and commerce, right? So when you go into that venue for an infraction, a code infraction, a statute code or ordinance infraction, and you are looking at the top, the heading alone is like, it's already constructed like a bill of lading. So if you are in any type of seaworthiness, or you get something shipped, and you look at the invoicing of that, the construction of that, which has the header, which defines the company information, and then you have the parties to and from, this versus that, and then you have what you call invoice will have an invoice number, but in the course it would have a civil action number, or either a criminal action number. It will have one or the other, right? So it has the same exact format in that, and in doing so, you're looking at the term and the action. The first body gives you the type of action that's being taken place. It's either If it's an invoice, it's for exchange of, it's a contractual exchange for goods, for money, which means I have the goods on in this invoice and you have the money of exchange. This is contract. We're talking contract law, and we're going to get into that, right? We're going to get into that in 1 second. Now, when you go into the admiralty court, the header on the body of it will say this is either a motion or to execute something, or it's a response to a motion, or it is a complaint, or is it, so which means you have those parties in there of a claim, or if it's a criminal act, you may have the society versus this and that person. So that's how it's all constructed, because we're dealing with contractual law. I hope I made that clear. You're dealing with contractual law in the court system. Let's get back to it, right? All right. So that's why when you're in there, you see a lot of Latin languages in there. It's very important for you to start looking at the different laws of maxims to understand the Latin languages that are being utilized, so you'll be able to know how to navigate the waters. All right, let's look at this. Let's look at some legal maxims of Roman or canon origin. I'm not sure if the live is over there, but it's a pacta sunt servanda, meaning agreements must be kept. An example is if a person enters into a contract, they are legally bound to fulfill the terms. All right. Pacta sunt servanda. Agreements must be kept. That's the Latin word for it. The English word is agreements must be kept. Now let's look at the next one. It's a ignoranti juris non exitus, meaning ignorance of the law is no excuse. Example, a person cannot claim ignorance of the law if they break a traffic rule. So, when someone is traveling in a conveyance, whether private or public, there's a confusion regarding your mode of operation. And if your mode of operation is not clearly defined and explained in a stoppage, in a detainment, when you are detained for questioning, that's when you see all these reels of people, window being bust out, being dragged out of the car, beat up, unalive, and things of that nature. Because what has happened over time, there's ignorance a lot of times on both sides. A lot of time the ignorance is on who they have hired. The enforcer that they have hired is ignorant of their own law, even though they have taken an oath to the Constitution. That doesn't mean they have understanding, understanding, and overstanding of the applications of the Department of Motor Vehicles rights of travel. So that happens a lot. So when you have ignorance of the law, there is no excuse for you, the person who is traveling or driving. It depends on your position at that time. A driver is someone in commerce. Traveling is someone in their private capacity moving about the land. All right. Now, let's look at, now this is what the topic is about today. Quod ab initio, meaning what is not valid for them from the beginning is never valid. I'm going to say that again. Quod ab initio, non-valid, meaning what is not valid from the beginning is never valid. Example, a contract that is void due to lack of consideration remains void, even if attempted to be rectified later. This is what we're talking about now. We're talking about the United States jurisdiction corporation is attempting to continue rectifying its usurpation, colonization, and domination on the First Nation. They're continuing to have the argument of homo animus, which means that there were only animals on the land when they came and discovered the area. When they came upon its discovery, there were only homo animus. Homo sapiens means animals. There were only animals there. There was no people. There were no humans. So that is, they want to continue to have that argument, but that argument is no longer standing, because there's a time period in law where mother remembers and mother rises, and that time period is happening as we speak. So that argument could no longer be upheld. So that's why there's a fight brewing to try to continue to stay rooted into the resources that wasn't theirs from the beginning. All right. So let's go back here. So, which means they're trying to validate the claim to the land, and the people are speaking. Mother is speaking. Now let's look at these elements of a valid contract. In order to have a valid contract, we're going to start right here with, say, offer and acceptance, and we're going to work our way around clockwise. Okay. Now, a valid contract must have these elements, and then we're going to show how the contract, the letters patents, such as the Doctrine of Discovery, the Papal Bulls, the Dominant Verses. We're not going to go into all them and read them, but we're going to show them how it's missing a lot of the elements in order for that contract to be valid. We're going to show you that. So let's look at that. Let's look at this. Let's look at in order to have a valid contract, it must be an offer and acceptance. It must also have intention to create legal relationship. It must have lawful consideration, which means what you're offering, whether the monetary value that you're offering for the object, it must have a legal weight of consideration. Now, it must have capacity of parties, which means that there must be the parties must be valid enough to make this type of contract. All right. So it must have legal formalities, which means that, okay, in contract law, we're going to stop at legal formalities, right? Because in contract, when we talk about legal formalities, contracts are written. Whoever writes the contracts, a contract could be called a contract of adhesions, ADHESION. Contracts of adhesions. What is a contract of adhesion? A contract of adhesions, when a contract is written one way, the creator that wrote that contract, they wrote that contract in their favor. They wrote the contract in their favor. And if they wrote the contract in their favor, that means they wrote the contract in their language of understanding, right? So when a person writes the contract as a contract of adhesion, which is unilateral one way and not bilateral, which is, hey, I'm going to write this contract. This contract, we agree the contract going to be written in, just say if my language is that person language is English, my language is Algonquin, which is a totally different language structure. So I'm writing the contract and we're both going over the different points of that. That is a bilateral contract. But when a contract is wrote in one way, one language from one creator, it's called a contract of adhesion, and it's a unilateral contract. What does that mean? This applies to the day. That means that if there's any type of ambiguity, which means if there's any type of error in understanding of the contract and is raise a claim of concern or non-performance to be able to perform the claim itself on that contract for either what is called remediation, to make whole, indemnify, which means to make whole. All right. So if a claim cannot, hi Dorothy, thanks for coming in, and thank everyone else for coming in over on Facebook. I see the numbers are going up. All right. So if that claim on that contract cannot indemnify, if there's a harm that need to be rectified for monetary, and the contract comes into question, right? And there's ambiguity or bias in that contract. The courts has to favor the party that did not write the contract. That's how that goes. That's how it goes. The party that did not write the contract, the courts must favor that party, because the person who wrote the contract wrote it in their favor, but it has bias in it. All right. So we're going to talk about that. We're talking about legal formalities, not declared to be void. Possibility of performance, certainty of meaning, lawful object. Lawful object. This is very important. Is the land something that someone else did not construct, did not make? Land, water, earth, air, fire. It was divinely given by the earth mother, the cosmic creator. What was given to you divinely to use for your sustainable living? How could you have lawful? How could that be a lawful object to sell? You can't sell it. It's not yours. There's a maxim in law, and it's a French term, and it's called droit droit. It's called droit droit. Let's look up. Let's look at what the meaning of droit droit. Let's look that up. We're gonna look that up. Yeah. We're gonna look that up. That just came to me. We're gonna look up. Well, maybe we're not. All right, I got everything turned. So I'm gonna give you this word. I'm gonna give you a little homework, and I'm gonna put in comment, and I'm gonna give you two words. I'm gonna give you droit, and that's a French word. Oops. I'm gonna give you droit, OIT, and I'm gonna give you also droit. I want you to look up both of them. Put those in your body lexicon. Look up droit, and look up droit. And there's a reason for that, because it gives status to the position of custodianship of the earth plane. All right. So that's a little homework for you today. And free consent. So these are the elements of a valid contract, right? All right. So we said offer and acceptance, intention to create legal relationship, lawful consideration, capacity of parties, legal formalities, not declared to be void, possibility of performance, certainty of meaning, lawful object, free and consent. Let's place this title of discovery on a meiotic scale. Let's weigh this on the scale here. Let's weigh this contract of void ab initio. Let's do a hypothesis to see if it's void ab initio, or do they have a standing claim? Do they have a standing claim? Let's weigh it on a scale. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. Let's look at what is the definition of void ab initio. is a legal term meaning void from the beginning. It indicates that something such as a contract or agreement was invalid from the moment it was created, as if it never existed legally. Let's look at that. Let's look at the letters patent. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about the letters patent right here. They are official documents issued by a monarch or a government that grant rights, privileges, or titles to individuals or organizations. They are essentially open letters that were historically used to confer monopolies, offices, or exclusive rights, including those related to inventions. Now, those related to inventions, that is a more newer construct added to it, just like when they added the copper color races, when they changed the definition of an American. They changed the definition of American. They added a comma and they added a now born and da. If you look at the definition of America, if you look it up, the old definition, if you go into old lexicon books, such as like around a Black's Law Dictionary, just say fourth edition, first, second, third, fourth edition, they give you the definition of American, and it'll say the copper color races found in America. And then if you look at a fifth edition of Black's Law Dictionary and current, and it's going to have a comma and also born, they're going to say also born in the born in America. It's going to add that. And that was to include the 14th Amendment, which is now being challenged. And it's not called Black's Law because it's for Black people. The author name was Henry Campbell Black. Just wanted to clear that up because I know a lot of people like, oh, it's a encyclopedia for Black people. No, his name was Henry Campbell Black. So let's clear that up. All right. So let's look at this letters of patent, Doctrine of Discovery. This is one we're going to analyze. This is one we're going to this is the one that set the precedent for the imperialism and colonization that we are experiencing today. Let's look at that. The letters patent is that right to ultimate dominion was derived from Henry VII's letter patent that granted the right to seek out, discover, and find lands of heathens and infidels, and to subdue, occupy, and possesses all such towns, cities, castles, and isles of them found. We're going to read that again. The letters patent, that right to ultimate dominion. So I want you to understand right, because we're going to challenge that by what authority? The right to ultimate dominion was derived from Henry VII's letters patent that granted the right to seek out, discover, and find lands of heathens and infidels, and to subdue, occupy, and possess all such towns, cities, castles, and isles of them. So if you're saying to subdue, occupy, and possess all such towns, cities, castles, and isles of them, how could you have the argument? How could there be an argument based off there was only Homo animus there when you arrived? That right there in itself should have been weight of repudiation. So we have to start having a jurisprudence mind and delivering the correct legal argument. But unfortunately, we have a lot of I'm gonna call them white sticks, because that was a war called red sticks and white sticks. And white sticks were the ones who assimilated. We have a lot of assimilators who fail to look at the truth and will uphold and continue to be the gatekeeper of the oppressor. So let's look at this. A colonial legal fiction, which is the primary authority claimed by European monarchs, including the English king, on the doctrine of discovery is a set of religious and legal principles developed by the Catholic Church in the 15th century through papal bulls, which is a writing, a scroll, like the Dum Diverses of 1452. Now, when did they say the United States was formed? They made their proclamation 1776. So the United States was even in a nation. It wasn't even thought of as even a nation. The Roman Pontifex of 1455 and the Inter Caetera Divina of 1493, known as the Doctrine of Discovery. The doctrine falsely asserted that Christian rulers could discover lands not ruled by Christian sovereigns. So were you a Christian then? Still don't throw away your Bible. Still don't throw it away. What was meant for evil gonna be meant for your good. The doctrine also falsely asserted that non-Christian inhabitants had no sovereignty that European powers were bound to recognize. Were you a Christian? Christianity was beaten to you. And that wasn't your religion. Still don't throw it away. The discovering nation gained a right to claim and govern the land, even if others were living there. This Doctrine of Discovery falsely asserted that the discovering nation, that's why it's called the Doctrine of Discovery, and they used the homo animus doctrine maximum, the legal maximum of homo animus, as a foundation of the discovering nation gain a right to claim and govern the land, even if others were living there. Now, let's look at the problems with this doctrine. It violated natural law and indigenous sovereignty. It was never consented to by the indigenous peoples. It was since repudiated by major institutions. Put a pin there, including the Vatican in 2023 and the United Nations. Now, in that repudiation, the reason they are not upholding, we're gonna bust this thing wide open. The reason that they are not upholding the repudiation that was announced in 2023, because they are well aware that the nations that called for the declaration of the repudiation are not the true indigenous people to the land. Those identified as natives are not the true inhabitants to the land. That is why they are ignoring the repudiation. Black people, you are the true indigenous people of the land. You have to raise up your nation and proclaim the repudiation for any movement to take place. Hello, Amber. Thank you for tuning in. All right. Now let's look at some earth laws that were violated. These are canon, church laws. The earth is the church and the fullness thereof. Law that is going to give on the just and the unjust. But she remembers. All right, the law of offering. The earth gives without judgment. The law of reciprocity. All takings must be matched with honoring. They are very aware of this. The law of cycles. Ooh, we are in the age of Aquarius. The age of I know and not the age of I believe is gone. Everything transformed. Nothing is permanent. I'm going to say that again. Everything transforms, nothing is permanent. The law of balance, every action creates an equal reaction. The law of interbedding, all beings are connected, the just and the unjust. Harm to one is harm to all. It's a harm to yourself. That's why their birth rates are negatives, because their ancestors has mocked them and cursed them. Law of listening. The earth warns before she reacts. Ooh, the earth warns before she acts. What is the earth experiencing now? She cries, it's a flood. She hiccups, it's an earthquake. Oh, baby. She's listening. She's listening. She's listening. The law of memory. The land remembers truth beyond colonial stories. The land understands. The law of the living archive, the Akashic record. The earth is not just habit. It is a record of moral law. It is a record of moral law. That is your church. This is church. Let the church say amen, amen, ashe, so mote it be. All right. Now let's look at natural laws violated by the European settlers. Sovereignty of nations. Now it said the natural laws refers to a universal moral order based on reason, justice, and intrigues rights. All peoples often invoked in legal, philosophical, and theological system. Sovereignty of nations. Denied in the violation by the European crowns, they denied recognition of indigenous nations as equals. The right to property. Claimed indigenous lands without consent. Consent of the governed, imposed foreign governance upon without negotiation, non-aggression, invaded and occupied without provocation. Don't that sound like it's not real? Okay, we're going to keep going. Prohibition of theft and fraud. Granted lands the crown did not legally possess. Treaty obligation, ignored, violated, and manipulated treaties. Cultural and religious freedom, suppressed indigenous spirituality and imposed European religions. What it say about the Doctrine of Discovery? Let's go back here. That right to ultimate dominion was derived from Henry's VII letters patent that granted the right to seek out, discover, and find lands of heathens and infidels to subdue, occupy, and possesses all such towns, cities, castles, and isles of them. All right. Violation, cultural and religious freedom. Now, let's look at earth law versus natural law. Let's make a comparison. Let's look at the source of authority over earth law is living earth, Gaia. Natural law, reason, divine order. The core philosophy of earth law is balance, reciprocity, natural law, universal morality. The relationship to humans under earth law, caretakers and kinship. Kinship, that's my kin, that's my cuz. I know you see my cuz wrote on here. Hi, cuz. Hi, kin. Yeah. Caretakers. That's our relationship. That's my kin. That's my cuz. All right. Relationship to natural law, natural property. Rights and duties, relationship to land, sacred and alive, earth law, natural property, forms of justice on the earth law, restorative, rhythmic, natural forms of justice on the natural law, objective, legal, enforcement mechanism on the earth law, natural consequences. You wonder how all the plagues are coming upon the plagues and locusts, and it talks about that. Those different seals gonna be broken. The enforcement mechanism of natural law, conscience and logic, All right. Time orientation of earth law is cyclical, like the tail, like the Oris Boris, the tail eating itself. Ancestral, the natural law of time orientation is linear and enlightenment. The expression of earth law is oral, ceremonial. The expression of natural law is written and doctrines. The violation consequences of earth law, ecological imbalance. Aren't we experiencing that today? The food, the water, the food is contaminated, toxin in the water. You have children dying, people dying, not just children, people dying from diseases in the water, airborne disease, flesh-eating diseases, eating the brain away and things of that nature in the water because there's been a violation of earth law. Violation consequences of natural law, moral guilt sanction. We're gonna put incarceration right there. Examples of laws, earth law, offering, memory, cycle. These are called your altars. Remember, all right. Natural law, life, liberty, maxims. Examples of laws in natural law. All right. Now let's look at that. Now let's look at by what authority. By what authority did the king have to grant a letters patent? The fraudulent authority claim and the mechanism used to disguise it as lawful. The King of England had no legitimate legal or moral authority to grant letters patent for lands already inhabited and governed by indigenous nation. The justification for doing so was based on fictional doctrine of imperial supremacy, not mutual law, treaty, or consent. And why do we say that? Because of lack of title, treaty, or conquest. Now, the nation and natural law, a sovereign can only assert legal title to land through right of conquest, which requires open war and subjugation, treaty, negotiation, and agreed upon by both parties, or voluntary secession by the original sovereign. Read that again. A sovereign can only assert legal title to land through right of conquest, treaty, or voluntary secession by the original sovereign. In most of what is now the United States, there was no conquest had occurred at the time of the early letters patent. No treaty had been signed. No indigenous nation had ceded land voluntarily. Therefore, the king's issue of patents constructed fraudulent title based on false legal doctrines, theft by paper genocide, which enforced later through military power and colonial law, which we experience today. When they're talking about, oh, the next thing you got to get is a real ID, paper genocide, a violation of the sovereignty of indigenous people under both indigenous law and principles of natural justice. Now, the king's authority was fraudulent. It had no rightful authority to grant letters patent over American soil. It had no consent, no conquest, no treaty, no moral or legal justification. What existed was a fiction upheld by force and still being upheld by force, designed to enable imperial expansion, which is still expansion going on today. It's not real, and resource extraction at the expense of indigenous lives, land, and law. Today, that false authority must be revoked, repudiated, and replaced with the recognition of the indigenous sovereign nation of the people that has been classified as Black, Negro, colored, and African American. Now, which means that all papal bulls, the doctrine of discovery, intercatera divina, dom diversis, all treaties, all statute codes and ordinance are void ab initio. They are void on its face. So nations, you must unite, you must rise up. We must rise. And this is the Turtle Island Declaration. It's a declaration from the indigenous nation, and this is what we must send out to our ancestors, the waters, the four winds, and the global people, that we, the children of this sacred soil, we come forth to speak the truth that has long been buried beneath the parchments of the empire. The British crown in its age of conquest declared dominion over lands it never had discovered nor understood. With ink and arrogance, they issued their letters patents, seeking to overwrite the sacred agreements between land and people with royal decrees. But these words, these so-called letters, hold no power here, not then, not now. They were never signed by our hands. They were never sealed by our consent. They did not speak for us, and they never will. So therefore, we must declare that these letter patents are null and void. They are ab initio. Our sovereignty was never ceded, and we are the original perpetual stewards of this land. And to the crown, they must withdraw their false claim. They must acknowledge their theft to the world and bear witness to our rising, and to our indigenous people that has been classified as Black, Negro, colored, and African American. We must learn to stand tall in our truth, and let the ink of justice now write a new chapter, the one that begins with truth, leads with honor, and ends in restoration. Because in the name of our ancestor and those yet born, we must rise today. I want to thank you for tuning in to Just Another Messenger. Please continue to look at our store. We have wonderful books there. Sacred Selfishness, The Art of Loving Without Losing Yourself. We also have a workbook that go with that. We also have The Living Word, A Journey into Etymology, and The Map of the Mouth. We have Laws of Nature, and Nature is a Goddess. We also have we have other elements on there. So please shop on our stand store at www.stand.store/Providence Press. All right. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are not monetizing on Cash App. I'm sorry, on YouTube, because we don't have the numbers yet. We are excited about our organic growth, and we will continue to grow in our adept chambers and ways for the ones who want to grow, expand, and come up out of her. All right. In the meantime, continue to support the channel via our Cash App at $Just Another Messenger. If you or someone you know would like to be a part of the show, please send a beautiful email to Just Another Messenger podcast at gmail.com. I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.